Bitcoin's somewhat funny because oftentimes price follows sentiment, but with crypto, oftentimes sentiment follows price. So when Bitcoin starts to heat up, everyone gets a little excited and their sentiment gets better, and then it heats up even more. It's a reflexive loop. And so I'm exceedingly patient. I think that you're going to continue to see evangelization. I think you're going to continue to see the value prop. Even if not in the United States, overseas as well, people want to find a place to store value, and real estate historically has been a thing, but fear of expropriation is very real, or fear of having your currency debased. I think stable dollars are a boon to the United States. I think they're a boon for people that are in the middle class of countries where they've historically lost their savings. There's numerous examples in Latin America, Argentina, among others, and in Africa. Currency crises are literally everywhere. I mean, there's a quote I like from Kant that out of the crooked timber of humanity, nothing straight was ever made. And you could think that a currency that is run by committees is no different, and will run into the exact same issues over time. Bitcoin, given the decentralized nature and the very transparent sort of governance or lack of governance, provides that antidote.
Yeah, it goes back to the, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. Everyone, just a piece of code forcing everyone to change around it. What are your thoughts? I mean, you mentioned that the amount of hash rate that you guys have in American Bitcoin, and it was something I wanted to ask you too, just your thought about total hash rate, which has just been climbing. I think over the last year, it's up 30%, or maybe over 30%, which is incredible. I feel like it's been, you had the dip in 2021 with China, and, for obvious reasons. And then boom, it's been taken off every year. It's just growing. So the security network, never stronger. What are your thoughts on, does price lead hash, or does hash lead price?
It's a great angle. Does price lead hash, or does hash lead price? They're commingled, but I don't think it's not a one-to-one. And what I mean by that is the hash rate is itself downstream of CapEx, typically, right? And advancements in chip technology, et cetera. But fundamentally, someone has got to be paying for these chips. There would not be new hash rate if people were not buying new chips, and so it's downstream of capital. The CapEx itself is downstream of a few things. It's downstream of demand. It's also, or perceived demand. It's also downstream of things like rates, interest rates. And so it's a little different than the price of Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin, because the supply is largely fixed, there's only so many Bitcoin left. Most of it's vastly been mined. The amount that's being mined per day today, it's about 450 coins per day, is not enough to really melt the supply-demand gap in a way that I think historically it did. I know people are proponents of, say, the 4-year cycle, et cetera. When there were thousands of new coins entering the system, for it to hold value, you would need a commensurate amount of buying pressure to happen in a given day. And that would need to happen every day forever in order for it to hold parity. With the price of with the emissions factor reducing, and of course in a matter of 2-3 years it will reduce again. I think you're going to see less of a relationship. I know between, for example, the miners and Bitcoin emissions and price. Hash rate, where's that going? It's going up. Now you can think of this as there's sort of three levels. There's the velocity, there's the acceleration, and there's a third one called jolt, which is how much is the acceleration accelerating. So in the case of hash rate, the first order, it's continuing to climb, as you've seen. The rate of that climb, so if you go to the next derivative, the rate of the climb is slowing down, or at least recently, obviously this is quarter by quarter, has been slowing down. Been a few factors for that. China had another crackdown on some of the dark mining, or the mining that was illicitly happening there. That would blunt some of the rise in hash rate. There have been less capital expenditure headlines from major miners in the United States. That would also slow the rate of acceleration. And so the third rate, which is the rate of acceleration accelerating? No, it's not right now. It's really velocity's up, acceleration, and then jolt or jerk is at third level. It's not currently a problem, but I'm very mindful of this, right? Because if people start to swarm into these chips, you could again see this. But for the time being, hash price is not really in a place where you're going to see a lot of new entrants. I think a lot of Bitcoin mining today in the United States, the parties you see are the parties that will be there. There's an incumbency effect that's happening. There's been a consolidation, or there'll continue to be consolidation among the major miners. I don't think it's to the degree that would present a decentralization risk. American mining is only a plurality to begin with. It's not even a majority. But I think you will see fewer names in the coming years. I think the middle ground miners are the ones that have really disappeared. You used to have different scales. Say the 1 megawatt guys, the 10 and the 100. I mean, 100 megawatts used to be huge, right? And 110 and 100 were big. 1 megawatt, to give a sense of scale, is like 600 houses worth of electricity. That was large enough to be a pro, but was not. You were not necessarily the marquee miner. The middle ground has eroded. I really think it's just tough. If you're not public, you don't have access to the capital markets in the way that the majors do. So it's really tough to raise funds, and you still need to find a way to find 100 megawatts of cheap flare or something. That's not easy. The 1 megawatt and the 2 megawatt guys, I mean, if you had a pipeline, you and I could get a container going and have a good time at it, but it doesn't scale. And then the big guys have the benefit of scale, but the middle guys, that's a tough one to stay in.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because that brings me back to when I was doing real estate full time. After I left professional hockey, I went and did real estate for 10, 12 years, raising money, apartment complexes, helping people, all this stuff. And in that world, I mean, you could get the small, 1 to 4 units, something like that. It was kind of like your mom and pop, like it was kind of easy-ish to do it. But then you get like 10 to 100 units, and that's that middle ground. I always called it no man's land, because it's too small to have management, come in from the outside, and you got to operate it. And then like any 100 units and up, you could get, like you said, public financing. You could have huge management companies come in and manage it for you. So it's this weird middle ground that always seems to be the part that gets squeezed. So it's really wild.
It is. It's a sign of, it's not all industries act this way, but it is a sign of the industry maturing. It just is what it is. There's such a capital arms race that I don't see that changing. The middle, I just think to become a new entrant in Bitcoin mining today, you need to be a master of, there's like a few different areas, right? You need to have a pretty good understanding of megawatts. You need to have a pretty good understanding of machines. You need to have a pretty good understanding of money and raising capital. And you need to have a management team that's able to cohesively weave those three together. So the 4 M's there, that's hard to walk up to home plate and think you're going to hit a triple. I mean, that's pretty dicey now at the scale we're operating, where we've got very sophisticated energy trading going on in the back end, and algorithms and construction teams, and 1 container is good, or 1,000 containers are good, but something in the middle is a little tough.
I think there's a lot of people, and we mentioned this past year or so, and not living up to people's expectations. Like, how do you think game theory plays out? Because I feel like there's a lot of Bitcoiners, I know part of me thinks this too, where you believe in game theory, and hey, when other countries announce, hey, we're going to do things, whether it's an SBR, or we're doing this, or Bhutan's mining, and then El Salvador is doing this, and all these things are going on. Does Bitcoin, and even mining itself, become a geopolitical weapon? Like, when does game theory play out? When you have this, the Jason Lowry, hey, I'm going to the Space Force, and the cyberspace is going to be the next frontier. It feels like that a lot, right? We have the Arctic, and the fight over the Arctic, and we're talking about Greenland, in which the Arctic part doesn't get talked about that much at all, like in mainstream news or legacy news, even on Twitter. Really, it's a thing that's kind of, but the power of the Arctic, and whether it's missiles flying over the Arctic, which is where they would go, or it's just the cooler temperatures, the Earth doesn't spin as much, all these little things that go into it. Is that the world we're kind of just like we're entering, where hopefully it goes that way? We're just fighting over hash power, and not we don't have missiles flying over the Arctic. So like, how do you kind of see all this playing out?
To the question about game theory, since that's a topic that you've just brought up, I think what's interesting here, as someone that's such a proponent of game theory, is that there's a few different games that are played. There's the obvious ones, things like the prisoner's dilemma, which is like, who's going to defect, who's going to coordinate. It's going to be very interesting. So as you look about Bitcoin, and you look about currency in general, currency is a coordination game. I have to give you a piece of paper that you have to accept. So we have to coordinate on it. And you're doing that because there's a third party who themselves has a fourth party who's going to take that currency and flip it around. So there's a coordination issue. At a certain point with currency, if somebody says, I don't want that piece of paper, or you think there's a risk that happens, then the game theory massively comes to play, and there's a risk of defection. And so much of any system is about ensuring that defection doesn't happen, or a defection does happen. Like, basically using the power of, say, the federal government, as was done under a prior administration, to force crypto folks to defect from the crypto group, right, and no longer cease and desist and not do their activities and defect, and to avoid allowing the crypto people to coordinate the way that they want to do to advance their own interests. So as I think about the role of Bitcoin mining and coordination, what's interesting is that the guys in Bhutan, as an example, I don't view them as competitors, which is kind of an interesting thing. I view them as peers, would be the word I would use for a group like that. Yes, their hash rate means that they're competing. If you were to plug in a BitAxe or a USB mining stick and be like a little tiny bit of hash, technically you're my competitor. But I don't take that view. I look more holistically at what we've been able to achieve as an industry, and I want you out there getting excited about it. I want you to be decentralizing the grid, and I think that forces me to have a little bit more rigor.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. See you in there.